In this module, we are going to learn Money in Economic Growth by Tobin. In neoclassical framework, the equilibrium marginal productivity of capital and rate of interest are determined by technology and saving behavior. And it is assumed that whatever is earned as profits is saved and then invested. Such propositions automatically assume that the warranted growth rate is just equal to the natural growth rate of the economy. However, if there is divergence between the two, the unattractively low rates of return may create a problem for availability of investable resources. This can be rationalized if there are other competing alternatives where people may wish to supply their savings if the economy is not providing sufficient returns. James Tobin states that most of the models are non-monetary in nature and take only one destination of the savings by the people, and that is investment. However, in any economy, there can be a number of other portfolio choices in which people can invest their money. Hence, different questions or issues of equilibrium growth path arise when monetary assets are available to compete with ownership of real goods.
After studying this module, you shall be able to find the different capital intensities and marginal productivity of capital under the classical or non-monetary framework. Examine the need of introducing the monetary factors in the analysis of stable growth path. Observe the properties of the monetary assets. Examine the effect of monetary assets and how they lead the economy towards the stable growth. Let us begin with the discussion of economic growth in non-monetary framework. In a non-monetary model of economic growth, savings are always equal to investment, and this process goes on and on until savings and investment augment the capital stock faster than the effective supplies of other factors. Under the conditions of diminishing marginal productivity of capital, an increase in capital stock leads the returns on capital to zero or below. At low or negative yields, people reduce or discontinue their savings or even to consume capital. The responsiveness of savings to rate of interest actually determines the upper limit to capital deepening and a lower bound to the rate of return on capital. But lower savings in the classical framework do not lead to a situation of underemployment in the economy, as fall in savings means increase in consumption expenditure, which automatically stimulates investment and the economy is back on the track. This can be illustrated with the help of given figure. In this figure, on horizontal axis, capital intensity, that is K, which is defined as the quantity of capital per effective man-hour of labor. Here, the term effective man-hour actually takes into account the improvements in the quality of labor inputs due to labor augmenting technological progress. The vertical axis measure the rates of growth, rate of return, etc. In the figure, AA dash represents Y, the average annual product of capital. As the units of capital increase, the average product per unit of capital increases. Therefore, this curve is downward sloping. It is also the reciprocal of capital output ratio. The curve MM dash represents the marginal product of capital. Since we assume the diminishing marginal productivity of capital, this curve is also downward sloping and becomes zero and even negative for more intense use of capital. Both the average and marginal product curves here are shown in net terms, that is net of constant rate of depreciation delta. The curve S1 S1 dash reflects saving behavior. It shows net savings and investment per unit of the existing capital stock. This tells about the speed of growth of the capital stock. In Herodian framework, it may be stated as warranted rate of growth of capital stock. The effective labor force grows at a constant rate n independent of the capital intensity, and since the natural growth rate of the economy depends on the natural increase in the labor force, this will be represented by a horizontal line nn dash. If the rate of growth of capital is just equal to n, there will be no change in capital intensity. If the warranted rate of growth of capital exceeds the natural growth of labor n, then capital deepening will occur. If capital grows more slowly than labor, K will decline. These facts are indicated in the diagram by the arrows in the curve S1 S1 dash, where the equilibrium capital intensity is K1, to which the corresponding marginal product is M1, which is negative in this diagram. If we assume a constant propensity to save and consume, we could have remained on the curve S1 S1 dash, but if we consider the change in propensity to consume and save, this behavior will be depicted by S2 S2 dash. Here, the ratio of net investment to output declines with K. This may happen due to a number of facts, such as due to lower yield on savings, the propensity to consume increases and savings fall. Tobin says this may also happen as the capital deepening also implies an increase in wealth relative to current income. As a result, the savings as a proportion to average income fall. In the figure with the saving behavior S2 S2 dash, the equilibrium capital intensity is K2 and the marginal product is M2. This is how the classical model in non-monetary framework works.
Now let us introduce some of the monetary factors. Some growth models assume a lower limit on the marginal product of capital. For example, Harrod argues that investors will not simply invest unless they do not receive a certain minimum rate of return, but the savers are not discouraged from trying to save when yields fall to or below this minimum. In Keynesian framework, such situation may lead to deficient demand and unemployment, while Harrod says that the difficulties arise when the warranted rate of growth at the minimum required rate of profit exceeds the natural rate. The rate of savings from full employment output would cause capital to accumulate faster than the labor force is growing. As a result, the marginal product of the capital would fall and push the rate of return on investment below the required minimum. In figure, HH dash is the required minimum. Then the KH is the maximum capital intensity investors will tolerate. Yet, both the saving behaviors, that is S1 S1 dash and S2 S2 dash, show that the economy will be pushed towards marginal products M1 or M2 and the capital intensities K1 or K2. It is this excess of ex ante savings over investment which gives rise to the Keynesian difficulties. The opposite problem would arise if the warranted rate of growth falls short of the natural growth rate. In that case, higher return on investment would raise the demand for investment goods well above the savings. This impasse will lead to inflationary gap in the economy, whose main consequence is an increase in general price level. The increase in prices is another form of forced saving, which reallocates the income from low savers to the high savers and ultimately the discrepancy in savings and investments is removed. But it is nearly impossible to talk about inflation in a non-monetary model. Moreover, a minimal rate of return on capital cannot exist in isolation. It must reflect a competition of other channels for the placement of savings. Therefore, we may consider other alternatives of store of value, that is monetary assets. It is their yield that set limits on the acceptable rates of return on real capital and on acceptable degree of capital intensity. Therefore, it is essential to introduce the monetary assets. Tobin takes a case of a single monetary asset with these properties. It is supplied by central government. This means that it represents neither a commodity produced by the economy nor the debts of private individuals or institutions. It is the mean of payment, the medium of exchange, and a store of value by reason of its general acceptability in the discharge of public and private transactions. Its own yield is fixed by the government arbitrarily. This may even be zero. The introduction of monetary assets in the growth model needs certain assumptions. These are discussed here. Number one, the value of money in terms of goods is fixed. Number two, all the individuals make rational choices. Number three, there is perfect information about the returns on available alternatives of the store of value. Number four, the community's wealth has two components, that is the real goods and the paper goods. Number five, the monetary assets can be easily converted into the physical assets and vice versa. Now let us understand the explanation of the model. For a rational individual, in case of two alternative portfolios, the wealth owners will wish to place all of their wealth in the assets with the higher yield. If they are the same, the wealth owners do not care in what proportion they divide their wealth between the two assets. If there are positive suppliers of both the assets, they will hold their portfolios in such a way that the two yields are equal. This is only through this behavior that we can understand how the institutionally determined rate of interest on money controls the yield of capital. In particular, it is this rate of interest which is the minimal rate of profit that leads to deflationary impasse. Now, by introducing the central government assets, the government can avoid this impasse in two ways. Returning to first figure, if we take HH dash as the yield on money, it will be the minimal yield acceptable to the owners of capital. The corresponding capital intensity is KH. One measure the government could take is to reduce the yield on money, say to M1. Alternatively, the government could channel part of the community's excessive thrift into increased holdings of money. The Harrod impasse occurs if the saving behavior is S1, S1 dash, but if only part of it goes to capital accumulation. Then the rate of increase in capital stock can be lowered to S3, S3 dash. Then there will be no problem, as at this curve the equilibrium capital intensity will be KH, consistent with maintaining the marginal product of capital at the required level HH dash. This can be done if the government provides new money to absorb the saving, represented by difference between S1, S1 dash and S3, S3 dash. The only way for the government to achieve this is through continuously running deficit finance by issue of new money. But we also have to find the optimal size of this deficit. In given figure, the vertical axis show the savings and the horizontal axis show the income. Both of these variables are shown in terms of per unit of capital. YH is the output per unit of capital corresponding to the required equilibrium in capital intensity KH. The government purchases of goods and services are assumed to be fraction G of output. Consequently, YH multiplied by 1 minus G is output available for private use and is also the disposable income of the population. Taking S1 dash as the saving function, SH is the amount of private saving relative to the capital stock when the budget is balanced. However, this much of the investment causes the warranted rate of growth to exceed the natural rate. Now, N is the natural rate of growth. It is therefore the right amount of investment. A deficit of DH will probably do the trick. It will increase the disposable income from YH multiplied by 1 minus G to YH multiplied by 1 minus G plus DH. And this raises total savings to SH dash. But out of this, DH is the acquisition of government debt, leaving only N for new tangible investment.
This can also be expressed mathematically. The total savings would depend upon the propensity to save, that is S out of this increased disposable income, and can be written as capital S is equal to small s into Y into 1 minus G plus D is equal to D plus N. It can also be written as D upon Y is equal to S into 1 minus G minus N upon Y divided by 1 minus S. Since D stands for deficit, second equation gives the required deficit as a fraction of income. This shows that the absolute size of the government debt is immaterial. It can be of any size and it should be a given proportion corresponding to the given level of income.
Similarly, we can also discuss the case of inflationary impasse, in which, contrary to the above case, the government will adopt the surplus policy. In this case, a balanced budget policy would leave the yield on capital so high that no one wants to hold money. To get public to hold money, it is necessary to increase the capital intensity and lower the marginal product of capital. But a higher capital intensity takes more investment relative to output. To achieve a higher investment ratio, the resources that savers make available for capital formation must be supplemented by a government budget surplus. The economy will remain at the equilibrium level. Under such an equilibrium, the shares of money and capital in total wealth must be constant so that their yields can remain constant. To maintain the fixed relations between the stocks, money, and capital must grow at the same rate. That is, new savings must be divided in the same ratio of the portfolios as the old savings. For further elaboration, let MKR be the required amount of money per unit of capital when the capital intensity is K and the yield of money is R. Since M is an increasing function of R, more money will be demanded when its yield is higher. If we take R as fixed, M will be increasing function of K because an increase in K lowers the yield of capital. It also lowers Y and therefore the transaction demand. Let W be the warranted rate of growth of the capital stock and let D is the deficit per unit of existing capital as already given in the equations.
The constancy of amount of money per unit of capital at MKR requires that D is equal to MKR into W. Assuming as before that savings are constant proportion of disposable income. The basic identity can be rewritten as capital S is equal to S into Y into 1 minus G plus D is equal to D plus W. And taking D is equal to MKRW, the second equation becomes WKR is equal to SYK into 1 minus G divided by 1 plus 1 minus S into MKR. In equilibrium, W is equal to N. The equilibrium degree of capital intensity is the value of K that equates WKR with N. In this equation, W, M and Y are written as functions of K. Since Y is decreasing and M is an increasing function of K, it is but natural that W declines with K. Moreover, the amount by which W falls short of the hypothetical W for M is equal to 0, S into Y into 1 minus G increases with K. In this figure also, we have S1, S1 dash as a saving function, where savings are constant fraction of disposable income. This would be warranted rate of growth if M is equal to 0. If we assume that the stock of money is adjusted to the capital intensity by deficit financing, the W1, W2 dash represents the warranted rate of growth of capital for every capital intensity. The intersection of W1, W2 dash with natural growth rate curve, that is NN dash, the equilibrium capital intensity will be K1 with marginal product M dash. This yield, however, is not necessarily equal to the yield on money R. The curve W1, W2 dash is drawn from a particular yield on money R1 bar. Lowering the yield of money, say to R2 bar, would shift the curve to the right to W2, W1 dash, increasing equilibrium capital intensity and lowering the equilibrium rate of return on capital.
Now, going a step further, let us suppose that the value of money in terms of goods is variable. This will have two important consequences. The real value of the monetary component of wealth is not under the direct control of the government, but also depend upon the price level. And the real return on a unit of money will consist not only its own yield, but also the change in its real value. Thus, under the conditions of deflation, even if the nominal stock of money remains constant, the increase in real value of the money stock will play the same role as in case of deficit financing, as it will increase the real disposable income and it will absorb part of the propensity to save. However, in the equilibrium, the real stock of money must be increasing as fast as capital stock, namely at the natural rate n. In the present case, this can happen only if the price level falls at rate n and the real return of money R is not simply the nominal yield R bar but R bar plus n. Consequently, the demand for money will be larger than if the prices were expected to remain stable. Equilibrium will require a greater stock of money per unit of capital and lower intensity if deflation is substituted for money creation. Equilibrium will require a greater stock of money per unit of capital and a lower capital intensity if deflation is substituted for money creation. This can be observed from figure where W3 W3 dash is the curve corresponding to a yield on money N. Points higher than the yield in case of W1 W2 dash. Moving on to the discussion of equilibrium path and its stability. Now it is important to discuss the stability of the equilibrium growth path when the community is thrown out of portfolio balance due to irregularity in technical progress. Labor force growth, saving behavior, change in yield expectations or portfolio preferences. If people have too much capital and too little money for its taste, goods, etc., the prices will fall faster or rise more slowly than before. In the opposite case, the public will try to buy capital with money and will push the prices up faster or fall slowly.
In this figure, the vertical axis measure the price deflation, that is minus P dash upon P, and the horizontal axis measure the rate of capital accumulation, that is K hat upon K. On each axis, the natural rate of growth, that is N, has been shown. On the horizontal axis, a rate of accumulation larger than N means capital deepening and a decline in yield. While opposite will be the case if capital accumulation is at a slower rate than N. The 45-degree line from the origin labeled portfolio balance shows the combinations of price deflation and capital formation that will preserve portfolio balances at the existing rate of return. The negatively sloped line labeled saving ratios shows the combination of minus P hat upon P and K hat upon K that exhausts the savings, assuming the same saving behavior as assumed in figure. On the horizontal axis, S into Y into 1 minus G is the rate of capital growth if all savings go into capital. On the vertical axis, S upon 1 minus S into P into Y divided by D measures a rate of price deflation at which the entire propensity to save would be satisfied by capital gains on monetary assets. Here, D is the nominal stock of money per unit of capital. The saving line crosses the portfolio balance line at the point NN. At this point, new savings will be divided so as to maintain both portfolio balance and capital intensity. But if deflation exceeds N, the division of savings will move to the northwest along the saving line. This means that the yield on money will be higher, but the portfolio behavior will not adjust it immediately and will take time until the new rate of deflation is registered in the expectations of wealth owners to make adjustments according to new expectations. Meanwhile, the yield on capital will be rising because capital accumulation is falling short of the natural rate. Further, as the ratio of income to money stock, that is PY over D, declines, the vertical intercept of the saving line moves down. The rate of deflation that would divert all savings away from capital formation becomes smaller and smaller. So the yield on money declines. The yield on capital rises, while the relative supplies will move in the opposite direction. Eventually, the rate of deflation will fall to N and the economy will be on the balanced growth path. However, a great hindrance to achieve this path can be the downward rigidity of money wages, which may prevent the reallocation of the portfolios that move towards the balanced growth.
Now let us summarize what we have learned in this module. In the classical theory, the interest rate and the capital intensity of the economy are determined by the interaction of the technology. and the saving propensities, both in the short as well as the long run. Keynes gave reasons why in the short run monetary factors and portfolio decisions modify and in some circumstances dominate the determination of the interest rate and the process of capital accumulation, which influences the growth path of the economy. James Tobin suggested that similar proposition is true even in the long run. The equilibrium interest rate and the process of capital accumulation may in general be affected by monetary supplies and portfolio behavior as well as by technology and savings. Tobin states that if under the conditions of low returns people are averse to invest, there can be other alternatives that have the capacity to plug this gap. He proposed monetary debt of the government as one alternative store of value and show how enough savings may be channeled into this form to bring the warranted rate of growth of capital down to the natural rate. The equilibrium capital intensity and interest rates are then determined by portfolio behavior and monetary factors as well as saving behavior and technology. In such an equilibrium, the real monetary debt grows at the natural rate, either by deficit spending or by deflation, leading the economy to a stable equilibrium.